Welcome to the Higher Education Access Corner. I'm your host, Tiffanie DeVan, and today I have with me a special guest, Stacey Thomas.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Stacey is going to give us a parent's perspective on life beyond high school today. So you have a son who is just about to graduate, right?
Yes, in just a few weeks he will be tossing that tassel. So,
All right. So that's exciting, number one. So congratulations that you all made it that far.
Yes.
And now let's talk about the journey, like getting him to this point and what's going to happen next beyond high school. So if you can kind of break out some things, that's what we wanted to share with folks, your perspective on what was the journey like with helping him choose what his next steps would be.
Yeah, sure. So when he was around a freshman in high school, he took a tour of the VOTEC in our county, and he really loved the dental program. And he got into it, so was super excited. So for the past 3 years, that has been his focus. He, was going to go into the dental program at the local community college after graduation. But then earlier this year, he got a new job that was in the sales area, and he flourished. Like, it just was his niche, and he really loved it. And he's like, "Mom, I think I want to go to school for business." I'm like, "Ooh, you throw a wrench in the 11th hour." So like, okay, like, let's sit down and let's, pivot and see what we need to do. So he decided that he didn't want to be super far away from home. So he looked at schools, within an hour radius or so. And he also was interested in applying to my husband and I's alma mater.
Okay.
So,
which is?
Susquehanna University.
Okay.
So like I said, up until now, we thought he was going to go to the HEC. So.
Now, what month are we talking when he switched?
February.
We're in February. All right.
February.
Okay.
So usually people start the college journey at the end of their junior year. We definitely got a late start. I wish we would have started earlier, but we had to deal with the cards that were dealt. So that was the whole new process. 20 some years ago, we were applying to college. It was all paper. You just get pamphlets in the mail to look at schools. Now we're like, okay, how does this journey look now? And that was when we were introduced to the Common App for the first time.
So before we jump into the Common App, let's talk about, because you said he started originally, he wanted to go into something with dentistry, right?
Yes.
And then, of course, it flipped to sales.
Yes.
Did you all have discussions, and if so, at what point throughout his journey that talks about careers?
We said, all right, he had originally did dental for one thing. He liked a hands-on career. He didn't want to do something where he was, behind a keyboard all day long. And two, he knew that the outlook for getting a job in the dental hygiene field and going to school for that wouldn't cost a lot of money. And it had a good return on investment because the starting salary is pretty decent for that field. So when he pivoted, we're like, well, maybe we should look to compare what your new choice is compared to what your original choice was. So we made spreadsheets and we said, what are the pros and cons of each option? So we said, in order for him to really fully understand if this is a decision he wants to make, we at least need to take his lead and apply to colleges. 1, can he get in? 2, does he get any scholarships? And 3, what does our total cost of attendance look like?
So you all had I think, an advantage because you've gone through this process. Both of you said, went to Susquehanna University,
Correct.
So you knew what it was like.
Yes.
He's not a first gen.
No, he's not a first gen.
So for you all, did you kind of like pull from your own experiences?
We did.
And then for that person who did not have that background, what advice would you give them to help them navigate the beginning phases?
So I think the beginning phases, if you have never gone through this before, is talk to the guidance counselor at your child's school. That was one, I guess, disadvantage we had, is because he was already on the VOTEC career, we never got a lot of communications from the school about post-secondary education. Never knew about Naviance before.
Oh, wow.
We had to figure that out on our own. So the first step would be talk to your child's guidance counselor and get information from them on where do I start. They're the ones who will let you know what you have to do, the steps you have to take, and they have a hand in the process anyway because they have to send transcripts or letters of recommendation to the schools your child applies to. So that would be my tip, would be to start with your school's guidance counselor.
Now you mentioned something that I didn't really think about. So if they're going to a VOTEC, what the counselor is really giving them, it looks a little bit different if you're going to your traditional, like, college prep type.
Absolutely. I
School.
think because they knew that his original plan was he was dual enrolled in HAC, already taking some college classes, that was going to be his next step. We were already had our foot in the door. They could probably put their focus on the other students who are probably going the academic track. So I had not received any information from the school about Naviance or how to request transcripts or how to, the letters of recommendation, what happens there. So that was kind of, we all had to figure that out on our own. And once we got to the application process of the second phase of his journey is when I had to reach out and get those answers, questions to those answers,
Right.
answers to those questions.
I got it. Yep. So for the student, your son, he did pretty good because he knew what he wanted to do.
Yes.
And he still had time, even though you kind of feel like, he kind of threw that curveball at me a little late in the
Yes.
game. He still had time to pivot and make the
Absolutely.
adjustments. I think a lot of that has to do with the support that he had with you all and his counselors to help him do it.
Yes.
What advice would you give to a student who doesn't know what they want to do?
I would probably do some sort of career exploration activities online. There's a lot of resources out there, even on our own website, educationplanner.org, where they can see like what career path might be good for them. And then once they have an idea of what they might want to do, just like with my son, then that's looking at what colleges offer those majors.
Right.
And what might be a good place to start. And then once you have your list of colleges, my next recommendation would be thoroughly go through their websites, read their materials, take their virtual tours, because you might take their virtual tour and see the campus or see the dorms and be like, this is not for me. Also look to see what type of activities the college offers. Like what are their extracurriculars? What kind of clubs and organizations do they have that might match your major or your interests? Because college isn't only for the educational part of it. If you're actually going to go stay at college, you need to make sure it's a good fit for you as a person. And ultimately, the goal when you graduate in 2 or 4 years is to obtain a job. So what sort of support system does that college have in place to help you obtain that position?
Right.
Do they have any networking fairs? Do they bring alumni in? Things of those nature. Like, it's important to look at the full picture. I know some kids get wrapped up in big names and big schools, and sometimes that's not necessarily the best option for them. They need to try to figure out,
What works specifically for them.
Yes.
So in doing that, was your son pretty much on point with what you all had envisioned, or did you even have something envisioned for him on the type of school he would go to, location, and
we
those
knew
things?
that we're very close to our son, so we knew he wouldn't do well if he went far away.
Okay.
So that we kind of set a radius, and we also sat down too. We kind of knew our financial situation, did some net price calculators to try to figure out, could we afford this school? Could we afford that school? And then kind of went off of that.
So those factors, and you don't have to share your specific ones, but or it could be specifically on how you all navigated this,
Yes.
or just for a student or family who are trying to figure it out. What are some key factors that are important when choosing a school for you all? I know you said funding, money
Yes,
is one.
Funding. I also wanted it to be a good fit for him. I don't think he would have done well at a big school. I think he needed something that was smaller, easier to get
little
around.
more intimate.
A little more intimate. And also, like, what kind of supports do they have? My son has ADHD, so, he needs sometimes supports to help keep him on track. So we looked at what were the disability services that the college had in place. Do they, have accommodations that they can give your child to help them succeed in the classroom at college? Because those are the accommodations that he had in high school, which allowed him to be successful. So that was another thing
That's
that we
important
looked at as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to pause there because I think that's very, very important when we're talking to students. A lot of times you'll see that students say, hey, I want to choose this school for reasons like you said, it's just a popular school, or maybe your friends are going there or something like that. And the goal is for them to really dig deeper to figure out, what do you need? Does this school have what you need? Does it also have what you want?
Yes.
But does it have what you need? So if you have specific things that help you to study or to stay focused, or even mentally and emotionally just to keep you where you need to be, it's important to do the research and to ask the right questions, to visit the schools like you said, to get a feel for what's it look like, maybe even the number or the population or the ratio of student support versus faculty or those or in those
Absolutely.
resources, I think are important too. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, and I'm glad you all knew
Yep.
to check into that for your son. Also, when we're talking location, location size and all of that, I think it's also important that you knew that, hey, a big school is not necessarily going to be his fit.
No.
Also, classroom size makes a difference, they
It
say.
does.
You know, do you want to feel like you're just in a big lecture hall and they don't even know your name, your number, and they just took attendance, or your assignments in and that's all they care about? Or do you need that interaction that says, hey,
Yes.
this is who you are?
He's definitely a student who needs interaction with his classmates and with his professors. I think they need to be approachable. And I think if he was at a big school and just a number, he would lose that that welcomingness that you get sometimes from your professors
Right.
and those connections that you make. So after we narrowed our list of schools down, I had him go through and take all the virtual tours and, you know, think of what questions would you want to ask when you go on tours at these schools, because you just don't want to walk through with a tour guide tell you what they know.
Right.
You have questions you're going to want to have them to answer. So that's what we did, and we toured all the schools he was interested in.
And how many were on his list?
There were 4.
Okay, that wasn't too bad.
So
That was reasonable.
We had 4. So we had our alma mater, Susquehanna, and then we looked at Millersville, Kutztown, and Bloomsburg.
Okay.
And I will say too, once you step on campus, you really get a feel for the school. Some schools had really great presentations and tour guides matched to your intended major who could really answer the questions you wanted, would take you to specific parts of the school that you'd be interested in. Others, it just felt like you were just going along on a dog and pony show, so to speak. So that once he stepped on campus, he knew that there was 3 that he really liked, and one that was like, if I have to, but not really interested in. So he did get into all the schools he applied to. He did receive merit aid from 2 of them, one being our alma mater, Susquehanna. But being a private 4-year school, the price tag is very large. So even after, I believe he got a total of $42,000 in merit aid, which is great, but the total price tag is $76,000.
Right.
So that left our total cost of attendance left to be around $35,000.
Which is steep.
Which is still steep.
Which is still steep.
And the other thing he wasn't too sure about is, does he want to have to take a foreign language, because the Apache schools did not require that. And Susquehanna has you have to go abroad if you go to school there now. And he wasn't sure if he wanted to go abroad for a semester. So, and we also said, you don't have to go there just because we went there. You know, we want you
Did
to
he feel the pressure?
He did. He's like, I need to continue your legacy. We're like, because my husband and I went there, and my brother-in-law.
Okay.
So, you know.
No pressure.
Yeah, there's a little pressure there. I'm like, but I want you to have your own experience. I feel like he would have measured his experience versus ours. And I kind of set the bar a little high because I had a great 4 years there. And I wouldn't want him to feel let down. So that kind of moved that school down the list. Bloomsburg and Kutztown were his top 2 choices, and he ended up getting a scholarship from Kutztown. And one of the other swaying factors was he's an avid golfer, and they have a men's golf club. So the fact that he could go to school for his major, and he loved the campus, he felt very much at home there, he could play golf, and it kind of fit in within our budget a little bit. That was his ultimate decision. So he's going to Kutztown in the fall.
So it kind of feels like, and hopefully it's the case, he's going to get what I call that full college experience.
Yes, he
because
will.
the full college experience is to take advantage of every opportunity. Most importantly, you're there to get the education you need to start your program.
Yes.
You know, so you're going to get the education, but what about the activities you're involved in? Are there clubs? Are there organizations? Does it feel like, you know, a place that you can be on campus and be comfortable, feel safe, and have some fun, and have a social life if that's what you choose to do, safely, you know, and feel safe. You know, is it a safe environment, and still get the student support that you need for all of the choices. So it sounds like he was off to a great start. So when you were looking at the schools and planning, was there anything that surprised you having, you know, going through this experience with your son? because you've worked at FIA now for quite some time.
Yes.
So you're in the industry.
Yes.
But this is a different field.
Absolutely. So, I mean, our financial situation is very different as our family versus when I was growing up. So I was basing, you know, the aid portion of it off of my experience. So, you know, I had unsubsidized loans, I had subsidized loans. I just thought everyone was offered both of them. But it wasn't until I worked here and he got his financial aid offer, I'm like, oh, he doesn't qualify for subsidized loans. Those are need-based. I had no idea. So we had to have some hard decisions because as a family, we didn't want him to take out loans if he didn't have to.
Right.
We're in a fortunate situation where we have saved for this day so we can help him pay for his college education so he doesn't have to take out loans. Now, if he had a subsidized loan, I would be like, that's a little bit of weight on your shoulders. You know, you can take that. But we're going to foot the bill for him to go to school.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's super nice.
I know.
And for those for our listeners who aren't quite sure what a subsidized and unsubsidized loan is. Subsidized is where the government's going to pick up the interest while the student's enrolled in school, 6 months thereafter, and then periodically if they need a deferment. After that, they're responsible for the interest that accrues at all times. And an unsubsidized loan means that student is responsible from the date of disbursement going forward. Interest always accrues on those loans, but to get the subsidy, there has to be a financial need, like you said. So I say that for those who are listening, and just in case you're trying to figure out what's the difference between the sub and the unsub loan that is out there. It's also really good that you had the that you're in a position where if he didn't need to take out those loans, he didn't have to. The other part that I still say is to those families who are listening, and it's kind of like, well, we might need those loans. What I still say is the loan is the last resort. So you use and exhaust those free resources first. If the parents are in a position to assist, by all means allow them to do so. And even if they are, scholarships are still an option. Still keep looking for those scholarships to help reduce the overall cost and the punch.
And he did get a partial tuition scholarship, which helps reduce our overall cost to the school, which is nice. And we figured too, his brother will go to college in 2 years. So that might be the time where he might have to take out a loan because we might not be able to swing it for both boys. So if we can cover the cost while we can, that just puts him in a better financial situation when he graduates. But we do know, now that we have done the FAFSA process and got our financial aid letters and figure out how that works, now we know what to do for my son, or if he does need to take a loan, he can take that unsubsidized in a few years, or possibly like the PA Forward loan here at FIA.
All right, so you mentioned the FAFSA, so let's dig into that. That's what I want to talk about. So the FAFSA has been redesigned for the first time in over 40 years. And I don't know if you said you did have unsub and sub loans, so you've done the FAFSA application in the past, some years ago. This has been totally revamped, and it's not a secret that there have been a lot of issues with the rollout of the FAFSA and making things run as smoothly. What was your experience like?
So we on purpose waited a while to fill it out until some of the kinks were worked out from the initial rollout. So it wasn't as bad as I was anticipating it to be. There was the only part that was confusing for us is after we filled out our portion, or I filled out our portion for the parent, it asked me to invite my husband because we file our taxes jointly. So, but he never really got the email, and we thought, well, that's going to hold up the processing of this. But he didn't have to go in and sign in and validate anything. But the way that the FAFSA looked like, it looked like he would. So we figured, we navigated those waters.
So you figured it out.
So that wasn't bad. And the other thing that was confusing this year is E-Town offered a new employee benefit to FIA employees and their children. So like, well, maybe we should apply there just to see what that financial aid package comes back with. And I'm like, well, can we add it to the FAFSA? We've already submitted it. We could not. You couldn't add any more additional schools to the FAFSA at that point in time. So that was kind of,
a couple of bumps, and that's just part of some of the bumps that came with this new rollout that normally you know, you would be able to go back in and add those additional schools. But.
And the only other thing is, I'm sure most parents out there are the ones who take care of this for their children. But every time you log in, whether it's yourself or your child, you have to go through two-factor authentication. So if I wanted to check the status of his FAFSA, I'd have to text him, can you please let me know the code you just got? So it's very secure.
Right.
But it wasn't as bad as I was anticipating it to be. It was pretty quick. A couple questions were worded ways you could interpret them differently, but luckily from working here and, you know, being on top of the news and what were the pain points, I went in.
You're able to navigate it a little easier.
Yes.
And I'm glad, hopefully going forward no one else has any issues, but I'm glad you didn't really have too many of the struggles. Would you say that, assuming everything continues to flow better, that this new FAFSA is a easier FAFSA, or based off of your knowledge of it, it's not a big difference?
I think for us, it wasn't probably that big of a difference.
Okay.
I mean, less questions, less time.
Right.
I think for other students who have, you know, unique situations with whether, you know, they have divorced parents or things of that nature, it could get a little hairy. But I think for us, the delta wasn't that different.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So that's a breath of fresh air, because it's been rough.
It was, and I wouldn't tell parents listening, don't be afraid of it.
Right.
Just because it's in the news and there's backlogs and there's complications, you know, it's really not as bad as everyone made it out to be. So, you know, don't be afraid to fill it out.
Well, you have to fill it out, so don't give up. So even if they do face those challenges, I think the goal is to still get it completed, and we're still there assisting students, assisting families. The schools are really patient with getting it done, and we know that we have to do it. So, you know, even if they get frustrated, still get it done. That's the good part, I would say, with everything.
And one good part is I love the IRS data retrieval tool. I didn't have to go try to dig for last year's tax return to find all that
scooped
information.
Everything out.
Just pulled it right in.
So were you surprised by the overall cost of the schools now?
I was.
Were you?
I was. It's just like, I was like, wow. I was like, we're paying for a state school what we paid for a private school, you know, several years back for us to go to school. Whether or not, it is a hard pill to swallow, but I feel like I need to give him that experience and that chance to at least try it out. And I also told him too, if you get there and you change your mind and this isn't for you, don't feel like you have to stay there. I think it's important for parents not to put that pressure on their child that, like, you have to stay there for 4 years, you have to finish your degree.
Because that would feel miserable.
It would.
And it does happen where students are doing it. It's not really for them. They're doing it to make someone proud, or they're doing it saying, I don't have another chance, or I cannot pivot, or anything like that. So the fact that you're engaging with him and sharing, you know, every step of the way that, you know, this is your process. I want you to get the most out of it. It's kind of what I'm gathering, how you're feeding it to him.
I just said, just make sure you at least keep your 2.5 GPA to keep your scholarship, which is good. It's a little
Understand the terms and conditions, right?
And I said, if you do decide that you don't want to stay there and you want to go somewhere else, or maybe you want to come home and go to community college, just make sure you pass your classes and get those credits.
There you go. So some of the highlights of going from, and he's your first, right?
He is my first.
All right, so let's give us some of the highlights of this whole process of helping him to navigate, some of the best moments.
It was a bonding experience with him. We have 3 children, and getting that time one-on-one with him to go tour the colleges and look at them online and just see the excitement in his face. I'm excited for this next step in his journey. I'm kind of ready for high school to be over for him, and I'm ready for him to have that fresh start and a whole new experience. I feel like college really made me who I am. And gave me friends for life, and I'm hoping he gets that same experience.
And I had an experience just like that as well, where everything you said, you know, it was like that full, well-rounded experience. No regrets. Had student loans, but I mean, you know, that's part of the process. But no major regrets with everything. For your son, has he talked about things that he's excited about? Is it just getting off to campus, or?
He's really excited for everything.
The whole experience.
He's excited to, you know, get into his major and learn more about the marketing and sales and business administration. He's really excited to meet peers with similar interests and background as him. He's ready to take that next step of more independence. And I think that it's good for him to try to fly the nest a little bit.
As the parent, are you ready for this? Any fears?
I am. No, because we have cell phones. He already told me we're very close, and I'm like, I'm really gonna miss you when you go to school. He's like, really? I was like, yeah. I was like, you're like the one kid who always comes in and gives me a hug every night before you go to bed. He's like, I have to. He's like, you're my mom. He's like, I'll probably text you every night when I'm at school to say goodnight. So he's ready to leave, but we still have that way of communicating. He's not that far away. It's like an hour and 15 minutes from home. So if he wants to come home for a weekend, or we want to go up and take him to dinner, I mean, it's not that far away. So I'm ready for him. I'm super excited for this next part of his journey.
That's nice. As far as you're the parent, you were there, and it sounds like you guys are getting him all there. He's getting ready to go to school. He's an adult now. And you know, when you get to college, there's that FERPA. You know, there's these rules and regulations that say, hey, this is the law. Privacy makes a difference. Nope, you're the parent. You're not the student. Without his permission, you can't do this. Do you think you'll have any challenges kind of like letting go and allowing him to navigate? If the school's financial aid office says, hey, we screwed up and there's a problem with your bill, will he call and say, hey, mom, or will he try to navigate, and will you kind of say, okay, hands off, I'll let you navigate? What do you think that's going to be like for you?
I think it's going to be leading a horse to water. I think that he's going to come to me and he's going to say, Mom, we have this problem. And I'm going to be, okay, I'm going to say, well, then what do you think we can do to solve this problem? And help him along that process to figure it out. I know that he doesn't have all the answers yet, but I need to at least let him try with my help. Yeah.
All right.
It will be a little hard, but the one thing I think we kind of got ready this year, because up until his senior year, we were like, always watching the portal to see if he had assignments done, making sure his grades were in check. And I'm like, hey, it's your senior year. This is your time. It's on you. I said, we're not going to remind you anymore. We're not going to be on you. It's your time to take responsibility for your schooling. And we stopped getting him up in the morning for school, and he got up on his own, got ready, out the door on time, kept his grades really well. I mean,
he's learning to juggle that, being an adult, time management, making it work.
Absolutely. Obviously there's a few hiccups here and there, but that was one, I guess, calming factor for me. That was like, he can set that alarm, he can get himself up, he'll be able to get himself to class, you know what I mean? And he knows that, I guess now that we're footing the bill, that he's kind of not going to want to let us down either. So, I think that we're going to be like, hey, how are your grades? Are you keeping them at 2.5 or higher? So, yeah, I definitely think that he's ready. If you would have asked me a year ago, I'd have been like, I don't think so. But he really matured.
A lot of growth over that year.
Yeah. I think this is something he wanted, so he's willing to work for it. And he was willing to take the steps he needed to do to show us that he's ready. So,
and you know what I really like is that you guys are kind of like, you're kind of saying, okay, we prepared you for this, and you're allowing him to test it out while he's still here underneath your roof.
Yes.
Because a lot of what we see with helping students and families navigate through this whole process, the parents in the driver's seat, and they do everything. And even down to, well, I need to do this scholarship application because he's just not going to complete it. So they're typing it in as if they're the student. Like, but that's not helping your student. You're not going away to school with them to write their papers. You're not going to school with them. And then when they get there, sometimes those students struggle with being able to navigate, and they just keep calling mom and calling mom. And I'm like, at some point, an employer is going to look at you and try to figure out, what skill sets do you have. So the fact that you're kind of like allowing him to do some of that now, I think is one of the best examples that the parents can do, because you're here to oversee it.
And the other thing, he was dual enrolled this year, so he took an English class at Hack, just to get his feet wet. He also took like an intro to college class last summer. And other than helping him, like filling out the application and going in with my credit card to pay the bill, we're like, here you go. I said, here's how you log in, here's where you go, because we watched a little orientation video. And I was like, I know I paid for this, but I'm going to step back and I'm going to see what he can do. And we didn't help him one bit. And he's not strong in English.
Okay.
English comp was the class he took. And, he got a 3.25. And, I'm like, hey, he proved to himself that he can do it. So I think that's another reason he figured he was ready for college. I will go back and say the other reason that he was hesitant, I think, to bring up the fact he wanted to pivot courses is we did not take the ACT or SAT.
Okay.
He did not do that.
Okay.
So fortunately, most colleges were test optional, and that did not hinder him in applying to schools or getting accepted or even getting, academic scholarships. So his, GPA from dual enrollment classes and his GPA in high school allowed him, to prove to these colleges that he was capable of being a student on their campus. So if there's parents out there whose child did not take the ACT or SAT, that should not be a deterrent from applying to college either.
Which is good, and I'm glad you did bring that up, because that kind of started, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of that kind of started when COVID kicked in. It was test optional. Some schools are going back to it, to saying, okay, testing, and others are not. And there are some students we talked to, and they're kind of like, well, I guess I have to narrow down my choices, but maybe not.
Yeah.
How about you, see what you can pursue. Now, here's the other part. I did on one of the previous podcasts, one with a student. He was graduating with his bachelor's degree this year, and he was the COVID class of 2020. So your son is that COVID class. So how does it feel to be able to celebrate in person?
Yeah, I'm super excited because, the end of his middle school years in 8th grade, we didn't have anything in person.
Any celebrations are heading into it,
Yeah, so I'm excited to celebrate with our family in a few weeks. Luckily, we need a lot of tickets for graduation. We can only get so many, but they're going to also live stream in the auditorium, so we'll all be there. We're going to have a luncheon that day, and I'm happy for him that he gets that moment where he can celebrate his accomplishment.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of happy for all of the students who were transitioning from one phase to the next phase, and it kind of like they had to silence it for good reasons, but now they get to kind of like celebrate out loud. So that's all awesome. A couple of last things. Best advice you will offer, and I'm going to put them in 3 different categories. Best advice based off of your experiences, even when you were going through it, as an employee, working here at FIA, and then navigating it with your son. Best advice you would offer to a student who's trying to figure out what's next for life after high school.
My advice would be to the student is follow your gut instincts. Don't feel like you have to go the 4-year path. Community colleges are great too. Trades are great. Don't feel you have to go to the big school. Just look at all of your options and see what you think will be best for you. The other advice I would give to high school students is, I know a lot of emphasis is put on the AP classes. I think that my son got more out of dual enrollment than he would have AP classes. So don't only think the AP is the way. Dual enrollment was fantastic. It's less expensive to earn those college credits in high school. It allows you to test the waters of college curriculum when you're in a comfortable environment near home, and you go to school guaranteed those credits, where in the AP exam you might not, because it's only if you score a certain number. So that would be my advice to a student. And also, with the beauty of the internet now, you don't have to wait for catalogs to come in the mail to look at colleges. Go online, look at their websites, take their virtual tours, see if you can read reviews from other students online of their experiences at the college, see what they have to offer, and make a list and go from there. The other advice I'd give to families is, if you visit the school first, more than likely they will give you a code to apply for free. Now, we kind of did it backwards, where we applied first and then went. So some of the schools we did have to pay the application fees, but those that do have a fee, if you go visit first, you can get that fee waived.
Sometimes with college fairs as well.
Yes.
And then you can even call them and ask them.
Oh,
will you do that?
Learn something new.
Not all schools will, but some will as well. They'll say, sure, we'll we'll go ahead and waive the fee. But you got to ask.
Yeah. The other thing is to, like I said, take those virtual tours, because if your list is long, like you might see like, oh, there's not much here for this school to offer, or they don't have the clubs I want, or the campus I want, looking for something that's more scholarly. Like I know some kids, I want the stone buildings and the brick buildings, or some kids want the more modern feel, or some people want to be more close to a city where there's other activities they can do off campus. So, you know, just take into consideration all those things when you're making your list. And like I said, I would also recommend to parents to go visit the schools not on the big days. Go visit the schools by yourself. You get a much more intimate tour that way. You can ask more questions, and they're more likely to take you into buildings or other places on campus where you can't normally go with a larger group. I think that made a huge difference in the experiences in seeing some of these schools.
I totally agree with that, and we've talked about doing that also on previous podcast episodes. The other thing I always tell everyone, and maybe just because of what we do here as Access Partners, visit the financial aid offices all the time. Even if you have some funding already covered, you know what? They might offer scholarships that are out there that you didn't know about. So talk to them, make sure things are squared away. And then for that student who wants to look at what's it like for a classroom feel, sometimes if you ask them in advance, can you pop in on a class? They'll allow you to see what it feels like, you know, with that, how big the classroom is, what the feel is like, because a lot of students have never gone onto, you know, going inside of a classroom setting at a post-secondary school. So I think those are all good pieces of advice.
Oh, I have one more tip. Also for parents is to go out and do the net price calculators for those schools. Some I found are very accurate. Some are off. But it will at least give you a ballpark idea. And even if the price tag scares you, it doesn't hurt to apply and just see what kind of aid you might get from the school. Even if you think that you're above the threshold for need-based aid, there's a lot more merit aid out there than you know, especially if the schools have large endowments. So, you know, between merit aid and, you know, academic aid, and if your child even plays a sport, you know, it might be in line with a state school. Don't always discredit private schools.
Yep, totally. I totally agree, and I always say don't ever cross a school off of the list based off of the ticket price because of those same reasons, like the endowment aid and other things that are there. A lot of times there's merit-based aid more so at your private schools than your public schools or state schools. But those are all great points that I think you bring up. The other part, just for those who aren't quite sure, net price calculator. That is a calculator that is required by all schools. All schools are required to have a net price calculator. There's also one with the Department of Education. It's at collegecost.ed.gov. There's a net price calculator on there, and what it really helps the family to understand is basically what are you really paying after the free aid is done. So here's the cost of education. Let's pull out the grants and scholarships or the free money that's being offered. What's left over is what you're really looking at, and that's a good way to compare schools. Like school A is offering this, school B is this, school C is that. Kind of puts you at a level playing field then when you pull away the free money to say, okay, this is my bottom line. And I do agree that really can make a big difference because you know what you're working with, or you know where that gap lies. So those are all great points. As far as I'm concerned, you could probably be on here as one of the access partners with us on the road because it's all good information. And it seems like, you know, based on your experience, work experience, and just the navigation that you and your family has done, that you guys are making some good, sound choices. And hopefully your son will totally enjoy his experience. Hopefully you'll enjoy the experience. And that by the time your next son comes in, 2 more years, you said?
2 more years.
It's going to be smooth sailing for all of you all. Now, here's one last question. For the experts, are there any bits of advice you would have to that person who's on the admissions side or who's on the financial aid side to say, hey, you know what? If you guys would have shared this, it would have made it a little easier? Or
yes. The one thing, I guess, if you're trying to sell your school and you're an admissions office, your perks on campus are nice. But it's also, I think, important for you to go to the end of the journey. This is where I see your child in 4 years, and this is where I think they can go with that degree from this university. Like I said, what type of networking we have, alumni connections, job fairs. Like, you're not just selling your school to get it to go to class. You're selling your school to allow your child to get a degree, to get a job.
Right.
So you need to sell your success metrics.
Right.
So I think that would be one piece of advice I'd have for people in admissions. Some schools that we visited were really good at that. Others
Not
were
so
not.
much, yeah.
It was more about like
The numbers.
like, or here's where you go to apply, or this is how many people we have on campus, and that's all well and good, but we want to make sure that our money is going to pay off at the end, that what is the best chance of setting my child up for success. So I think that is definitely a piece of feedback I would give to admissions offices. I would also give colleges the tidbit that sometimes when you go on these websites, it is impossible to find the cost of attendance and a room and board. And no two schools will lay it out the same.
In the exact same order, same place, I agree.
Yes, some will do it here's by semester, here's by year, or here's all the different meal plans. Like, give me that final number. That's what the parents are looking for. Don't make them add it up.
So for my schools who are listening, please take that advice. Maybe you all can revamp it and make it a little bit easier, because I do agree when you're going to the sites, everything is not always in the exact same spot. The lineup looks different, and some things seem like they're embedded deep.
Yes.
Whereas others, it's kind of like right there in your face. So I totally agree with you on there. Anything else that you would want to share that we've not talked about, or that you want to re-emphasize?
I also think it's important, as much as we're giving our children an experience, that does come at a cost. So I think it's really important for families to look at the numbers and make good, logical decisions. I know some parents and kids like, I really want to go to this school. I don't care what it costs. And in 4 years, they're $100,000 in debt and they have no idea how they got there. I think it's important to look at the numbers and don't just look at it year one, look at it year 1 through year 4. And if your child is taking out loans, look at how that $10,000 you're taking out year 1 is going to look total cost of repayment over the life of the loan. A lot of people just think, well, I just borrowed $10,000. But yeah, if you're paying interest on that loan for 15 years, that $10,000 could easily turn into $25,000 or $30,000 depending on your interest rate. And that's the horror stories that we hear now in the media.
Right.
And I think it's our job as parents to help educate ourselves and our children on that financial literacy piece of what does this look like when you get out of school.
Because you have to now live, and you have to be able to fit that student loan payment into your budget.
Yes.
And you don't want to break the bank. You don't want to live in mom and dad's basement forever.
No.
Getting it done. And the good part about what you're saying is those resources, at least from if you're getting the federal loans, they can go right into their studentaid.gov account, and they can see every year exactly what they have. They can do the calculations to figure out what their monthly installment would look like. And so that's a good idea. After year 1, this is where we're at. After year 2, this is where we're at. And then the other piece I say to that is use those tools and resources that are out there. We have a great one called mysmartborrowing.org.
Absolutely.
You can kind of like do that comparison to figure out, are you borrowing too much money in comparison to what your starting salary is going to look like when you graduate.
I just think it's important for your child to have a realistic viewpoint on what this really is going to cost and what it's going to look like at the end. And not only that, with the rise of social media, and they spend a lot of time on their phones, and they watch TikToks and Reels, and they see man on the street interviews with, well, how much do you make, and what's your job, and how long did it take you to get to that route? Well, some of those things aren't necessarily realistic. Not everyone's going to come out of college making 6 figures.
Right.
That's probably half of that is realistic. So your child needs to have that view of what is my situation going to look like in 4 years, and am I biting off more than I can chew? It might crush a dream, or it might pivot a dream to a different one and put you on a different road or path, but that doesn't mean you can't still get to where you want to be.
I agree. There's more than one road to get to the path, that your end path that you want to go to, and you don't have to buy the biggest price tag that you can find because it looks good and it came with all the bells and whistles. At the end of the day, they're trying to get the education they need to go into the career that they want, so they can live the lifestyle that they need to live, and that they want to live without breaking the bank. And I agree, all of the steps and tools that you've provided, I think are valuable. I think your son is off to an awesome start, and I think you guys did a great job of pouring into him all of the key resources and things that he needed. I am hopeful that next year or even the year later you'll come back on and tell us how things are going, because this is a good thing, and I think he sounds like he's excited. So I'm excited for him and excited for your family.
Yeah, I'll come back in 2 years and let you know what it's like having two kids
in college, right?
And figuring out how to pay for 2 kids in college. So that's going to be, interesting, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
All right, Stacey. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on the Access Corner. To all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.